Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. This is Nerd World Empire, and now the Sheliak. The Sheliak are a species of non-humanoid aliens that live in the Alpha Quadrant. Now, despite the reputation of the Federation's universe, not every face that looks back at you across the view screen is gonna be a familiar one. Not every species is differentiated just by a few differences in cranial ridges, bone structure, and musculature. Some races are fairly damn different to the average humanoid and have no similarities or commonality with them whatsoever, and the Sheliak are one such species with little to no common ground with other races. The Sheliak consider many humanoids, and humans as well, to be lower life forms, and don't even think twice about eradicating a human infestation, their words, on a world that they might like to colonize. One such world was the planet Tau Cygni 5. Tau Cygni 5 was colonized by humans pretty much unknowingly to the Federation. The Sheliak would contact the Federation and tell them to remove the infestation before colonization efforts would begin. The Federation, to maintain a peace with the Sheliak, would order Starfleet to remove the human colonists and basically let the planet go to the Sheliak. This was in accordance with the treaty, which had ceded several Class H worlds to the Sheliak. Now, the reason the Federation would have ceded such planets to the Sheliak Corporate, which is the name of the greater whole of the Sheliak people, is simply because Class H worlds for most humans and most member races within the Federation is pretty much uninhabitable. This particular world was saturated with hyperonic radiation, which is ordinarily very dangerous to most humanoid species, including humans. Although these humans have found a way to adapt to the environment or make the environment adapt to them, it was still a very dangerous environment for any human to spend any considerable amount of time in, with many of the original human settlers being killed off by the radiation's effects. But to the Sheliak, presumably, hyperonic radiation was not a problem, as again they liked Class H environments. Class H was basically, as I said, the extreme end of what was barely habitable for a human, but to a Sheliak, it was Eden. The Sheliak were an incredibly deliberate species in a lot of ways, particularly linguistically, and although they were capable of learning and understanding and even communicating in languages spoken throughout the Federation, they found many of these languages, in fact all of these languages, to be imprecise and too crude to effectively facilitate adequate communication. This dictated that the treaty, the signed by the two powers, was gigantic, in fact the largest in Federation history, in order to accommodate for the Sheliak's desire for the treaty to be extremely precise, with thousands of subheadings, clauses, and all kinds of loopholes. It took the Federation many years to negotiate this treaty, and it was difficult for the captain of the USS Enterprise, NCC 1701D, specifically Captain Jean-Luc Picard, to use this treaty to try to save the lives of the colonists who they didn't really have time to evacuate quick enough before the Sheliak would colonize the world. Although the human colonists felt that they could fight back against the Sheliak would have simply bombarded them from orbit and denied them a chance to fight. In terms of physicality, only one Sheliak was ever seen, although Picard was permitted aboard their ship for a direct meeting. It wasn't like it was shaking hands, if the Sheliak actually have hands. The Sheliak would communicate in English, or at least in a language that Universal Translator was capable of translating, as the Sheliak language was too complicated for humans to generally use. And although this communication was cordial, the Sheliak were belligerent in their endeavor to basically, their intent to colonize this world. And again, in terms of appearance, they seem to have, assuming that this was their skin and not some kind of covering, some kind of almost metallic looking skin, and they're an amorphous blob like appearance, although they seem to be fairly solid, so they weren't lacking a skeleton or some kind of hardened shell. The way their outer surface moved would indicate that it wasn't a hard shell on the outside, but was some kind of harder structure on the in. They simply weren't humanoid, but that's really as much of an assessment as we can make. They had what appears to be a head, but no visible face. They had what could have been appendages, if assuming what they actually had over them was a covering, but it's not entirely clear. How they control their ships is equally not clear, and although they are receptive to telepathic communication and even at one time allowed it to be performed on them in order to try to facilitate better communication again between them and the Federation, which was the biggest stumbler with the Sheliak, it was again unsuccessful, which is why the treaty and other subsequent communications became so specific between the Federation and the Sheliak. Although the Federation was successful in negotiating a sort of temporary reprieve and allow the Enterprise to safely evacuate the humans before the Sheliak would simply kill them, as was apparently their right, the Sheliak would withdraw. It is noted that their technology was approximately on a par with that of Starfleet, with one of their vessels, although a little smaller than a Galaxy-class starship, being approximately as powerful and as well armed. In terms of appearance, it was a fairly standard-looking vessel. It had no specific appearances. It almost looked like a merchantman, but bigger. And that is basically the Sheliak. Although not allies of the Federation, you could not really call them an enemy. They seem to take no sides during the Dominion War and don't seem to take a preference in any conflicts with races like the Borg or any other extragalactic threats or territorial threats to the region, and pretty much just keep to themselves, trying to limit contact with humanoid species as much as possible, as they find them rather annoying and lower life forms than themselves.
I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.